So, I begin with figuring out how to use this. So I begin with a one-word summary. And it's not introduction. I begin with a one-word summary of where I'm heading. So I'm fully aware of the challenges of stepping into the quagmire of ethics and social and moral philosophy. This is a mosh pit where human history, where people have been arguing about this. I do not claim to have an answer or a way out of the quagmire. What I have is a spot that I've found reasonably comfortable for me, and maybe there'll be something in here that will be reasonably comfortable for you as well. So, there are two very different threads that I'm going to be drawing on in this talk. One is the philosophy of Emmanuel Levinas. He was a 20th century philosopher. He was a Lithuanian Jew, studied, and that's important because he was also a Judaic scholar. He spent time studying with Heidegger and Husserl. Sartre credits him with introducing him to phenomenology. He's probably, many of you probably haven't heard of him, but he's considered one of the most important moral philosophers of the 20th century. He lost family to the Holocaust. He spent the war in prison. He was a French soldier, was imprisoned in a German prison camp. So he knows the heart of darkness, of human darkness. And he wrote in French, in the French 20th century philosophical tradition, and I would not have known about him or understood him had it not been for my dear friend Roland Champagne, who was a scholar of 20th century French philosophy. He was a dear friend for 25 years or more. We spent many, many days, weeks, years talking about these kinds of things, and his spirit pervades everything that I'm going to be talking about today. And this is obviously a picture of him. So the second thread that I'm going to be drawing on is the research in human development. So, at least to my thinking, it's great if somebody has a compelling philosophy, if there can be some kind of empirical backbone to that. That to me makes it more compelling and convincing. And so what I'm going to be offering is my integration of his philosophy with human development research. So I'm drawing on them, but it's going in my direction. I'm the fault and the cause of the confusion here, most likely. So, overview. So in November, I gave a talk on humanism and the sacred, and those pieces are going to be important in what I talk about today. So I'm going to spend some time, brief time, talking about what is humanism and what is the sacred. Then a very brief overview of ethics and morality, very brief, painfully brief, and using that really as the stepping point or jump off point for me talking about the origins of ethics. And then with that, addressing the issues of moral abstractions and moral universals, and ending with the problem of moral relativism and the ethical society. So this is where I'm headed, and so I'm going to start with humanism. So humanism is Greek. It's derived from Greek philosophy. Its influences stretches back to the 4th century BCE. Here I have a quote from Pythagoras in the 5th century BCE, which I think in one sentence does a very nice summary of what humanism is. That is, humans are the measure of our feelings. So what does this mean? It means truth and what is real is determined by human perception, judgment, experience, and reason. So it is human focused. And this drawing is by Leonardo da Vinci 2,000 years later in the Renaissance. It's called the Renaissance because it is the revival of Greek thought, and we're going to see the influence of Greek thought right into today's humanism and the ethical society. And Leonardo da Vinci was the quintessential expression of humanism in the Renaissance. So, our modern world is a humanist world. Humanism is not some kind of esoteric philosophy that exists only in the ethical society and in philosophy departments. We live in a humanist world, and generally most people don't appreciate the fact that we are humanist in our modern world. So what does that mean? Derived from the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is the continuation of Greek thought and draws and leads to these kinds of assumptions and conclusions that form the basis of our modern world. Reason and skepticism toward traditional authority. Scientific progress. Scientific progress derived from this world explanations, not biblical text or what God has ordained, but what we can discover in this world with this world explanations. Government by consent. Think about monarchy and the rebellion against monarchy. The American Revolution was a part, an expression of this Greek idea of we the people, individual rights and liberty as developed and expressed in the Enlightenment. And this world concerns, a shift from concern about the plight of my soul in the next world to the struggles of myself in this world. No supernatural, no divine. There's one seat here, and there's seats out. I'm sorry, I should have had more seats, but there's, okay. So, the modern world is a humanist world. The sacred. What is the sacred? The sacred definition is that which is set apart. The mundane, profane world, which is set apart from something entitled to respect and reverence. I'm going to put on my glasses because I'm having a hard time reading my notes. Okay. So what's important here in the way I'm conceptualizing this is there are two different experiences associated with this definition. There is the experience of the mundane, which is our common, normal, familiar, everydayness, the way in which we motor around the world. It's a given, it's obvious, it's there, and it's what we just assume without thinking. And this is in contrast to the experience of the sacred, which involves the experience of awe, reverence, astonishment, fear, and humility. And I make an important distinction between the experience of the sacred and the attribution of its source. So there are many attributions of the source of the sacred. Many different religions point to different sources for the sacred. But the experience of the sacred is, there's a common experience of the sacred. So this is an important distinction, because I also want to talk about the humanist world of the sacred, and it is this world. It is the experience of the sacred in this world. So I want to give you an example of this contrast between the mundane and the sacred in this world. So my wife Sharon and I were at a new place in the summer, and I saw a bird that it was just miraculous. It was this incredible shades of blue, splashes of white. It had a crest, black stripes. I took my binoculars and I rushed out to spy this bird, and I called to my wife Sharon. I said, "You've got to come and see this. This is a really miraculous, stunning bird." Oh, that bird. This is what I saw. So your laughter is important, because that really is the hinge point here. What I saw was this creature naked, without a word. I saw, if you look at this, try to look at this creature now in terms of the colors, the shape, and the thing flies. So as soon as you say blue jay, you've made an abstraction that has rendered this experience mundane. Oh, it's just a bird. It's just a blue jay. Just. What are you getting all excited about? I was getting excited about it because I saw it naked. And so this is the epiphany of the ordinary. We are surrounded by a miraculous world that we have tamed and managed through meanings and abstractions. And the abstractions render this miraculous experience as mundane every day. So now it's not this incredible creature, it's a blue jay. Oh, okay. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I see that this was a blue jay? Right? So the mundane abstraction abstraction renders this world mundane. And our access to the sacred in a humanist world is stepping askance from the meanings that render the world mundane, and seeing it naked, experiencing it naked. I'm using naked in quotations, right? Maybe. And the experience of awe, reverence, fear, humility, astonishment, of being in this world of mystery that's beyond explanation. This is the humanist experience of the sacred in this world. So ethics and morality. This is one PowerPoint slide of an overview of 3,000 years of ethics. Okay, which allows me great freedom to be wrong in many ways. So, first in terms of the definition. So the dictionary definition of ethics is communally based. So if you think about, there are codes of ethics for lawyers, codes of ethics for doctors, for psychologists, right? And this is in contrast to morality, which is more personally applied. Now, the Encyclopedia Britannica points out that these dictionary definitions don't hold in practice. We use these terms interchangeably, and there's a huge gray area in between, and I'm going to be using them interchangeably. Okay, so in terms of history, the medieval period, there was a universal morality in the West, conferred by a supernatural being in sacred texts. in a sacred text. Thou shalt not. Commandments from a supernatural being to his children, finger wagging about what they should not do. Okay? This changes with the Enlightenment. In the Enlightenment, morality is found in this world explanations. Same as with science, also with morality. And the two common or very frequently traveled paths in Enlightenment explanation of morality is reason, and Kant, this quote, and this is a quote that has appeared here in the Ethical Society periodically, one should always respect the humanity in others, and one should only act in accordance with the rules that hold for everyone. This is a principle derived from reason. The second thread in this Enlightenment approach to ethics and morality is one based on pleasure and pain. This is Mill and utilitarians. Morality, the greatest good for the greatest number. We've had people come and talk about this in terms of how we should invest our money, for example, to do a calculus of what's the greatest good for the greatest number. So in both of these, morality is derived from more fundamental attributes of reason or pleasure and pain. Okay, this is a critical point because it's a focal point from which Levinas is going to argue, no. The origins of ethics are ethics first. We are fundamentally ethical beings. It's not something that we acquire through reason or find our way through punishment and pain in a psychological perspective. This is also called in psychology. Rather, we are fundamentally ethical. What it means to be human is to be ethical. Why is that? Because we are a social species and we cannot survive alone. And relationship is primary. And because relationship is primary, this engenders an ethical beholding one to another. So ethics is we are fundamentally ethical, derived from the fact that we need each other. We rely on each other for survival. And ethics is integral to the experience of the sacred. So we are born helpless. We cannot survive a day or two on our own. So if you want to argue about are we relational, how important that is, take a look at the newborn. Not going to survive without others. And our biological survival depends. God is telling me stop.
Is there somebody who can help with the mic?
Insistently telling me to stop.
Turn it off.
Yeah,
Click
good
it off.
idea. Click it off and click
Oh,
it
is
on.
this causing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too close to the computer?
Oh.
There is no God. Can you hear me? I'll try to talk louder. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. So, in terms of our helplessness at birth, we are biologically hardwired for relationship in a face-to-face, one-on-one encounter that is necessary for our survival, and it also is the origins of ethics. The infant is biologically attuned for face-to-face encounters that are necessary for their survival. From birth, infants are hardwired to attend to the human face, and particularly to the human eyes, at a very close focal distance. Infants can distinguish the smell of their mothers from other people. They are attuned to human voice. This should not surprise, right? Biologically, as an infant coming in helpless, you better be hardwired to be able to make contact and communicate with the people who are going to keep you alive. And this is reflected in basic functioning of hearing, of vision, smell. There is what's called empathetic crying. An infant will start crying if it hears another infant cry. So if you think about this, this is a attunement to others, where the reaction of others is so powerful that it will cause the infant to respond in harmony. Same with imitation. Imitation is necessary for human development. What is that? It's taking the body of another and making my body over in the image and form of another. This is remarkable when you think about the relational implications of care that's involved in this. Also, hardwired to communicate through cries. Cries, it's very difficult to ignore an infant's cry. And that's biologically intended, right? To get attention and express through different cries, different communicative meanings. And also in body posture, I've seen slow motion images of infants coordinating their bodily movements in kind of a herky-jerky way with the rhythmic vocalization of an adult. This is an attunement to others. We are in relationship from birth, and this is the origins of ethics. So there's the other side of the equation, right? We have the infant being attuned. Adults are also attuned. Parenthood. Sacred life appears in our midst. This helpless infant being appears looking at us, beckoning us to be beholding. And ethically beholding is being under an obligation. I'm having trouble reading this, sorry. Indebted or grateful to somebody, it implies a sense of duty, binding, or accountability. There's a responsibility in this helpless being arriving out of the void in our presence, and their life and survival is dependent on us. I want to read you a quote of the experience of becoming a parent. This is from Frederick Beckman's My Friends. Becoming a parent, someone said it's an invisible tidal wave. It hits you with such force, you lose your breath and never quite get it back. You spend your whole life gasping because it's a love so immense it squeezes the air out of your lungs. Everyone else thinks you look like the same person afterwards, but you don't understand any of it because there's such a clear before and after. A completely new you. So I think this really captures this ethical beholding of the arrival of this helpless being in our midst, requiring our responsible ethical beholding. And that ethical beholding is love, of care for this creature, for this being. And love is different than functional caretaking. So there have been evidence of infants and children in orphanages and other places where they are provided with merely the functional necessities of being fed, clothed, and whatever to survive. And what happens, there's a term for it, it's called failure to thrive. They literally fail to thrive and sometimes die. Even though they're getting the proper nutrition and whatever, they're not getting the love that is necessary as a component of what this is. So this is the ethical beholding manifest in the love, and also in the flip side of this now, of adults. Try to talk to a baby like you talk to me, or you don't. You engage in this exaggerated, what's called mother-ese, of high inflections, high contrast, in order to engage in a communicative exchange with this infant. And adults can recognize distinctive cries, the meanings of distinctive cries of infants, the use of eye gaze and rocking and touching as forms of communication with this helpless being who needs to communicate and have a relationship in order to survive. And it's a two-way street. And this is critical, the expression of ethics is in the ethical beholding, which is in the daily acts of feeding, clothing, moving, and protecting. In the everyday common acts. We think of ethics and morality as something that appears out of the landscape, a flat landscape of our daily lives when we're confronted with some kind of choice or decision, or we're going to go make a statement about our social justice or whatever. This is when we express our morals and ethics. That's one place, but it misses the fact that we are fundamentally ethical, and what that means is our every act, the way we comport ourselves is ethically freighted, and certainly very visible and manifest in the care of helpless infants who rely on the ethical acts of feeding, clothing, and caring. And now I've been talking about parent-child, but this applies to the human family more generally. We are part of a human family, and the sacred beholding is in the face-to-face or presence of another person. It's not, it is manifest most starkly in our engagement with infants and children and caring, but it is also there and continues in our relationship with others. We are a social species. We as adults cannot survive alone. The worst form of punishment is solitary confinement. A concept that captures some of this is intersubjectivity, and we typically, and the term intersubjectivity, intermeaning between subjectivity, meaning our personal subjective experience. So this means between ourselves and others, there is a space of intersubjectivity. And it is in this space of intersubjectivity that ethical beholding is manifest. Now, we typically think of ourselves as independent agents, kind of socially isolated atoms that come in proximity to each other. And what this is suggesting is absolutely not. What relationship means is we are bound in there's an intersubjective space. So this can be hard to grasp or easy to grasp but disagree with. So I want to have you engage in an experiment or an exercise with this. So what I'd like you to do is for 5 seconds, without blinking, I'd like for you to look at the front of the chair in front of you. And for those of you in the front row, look at this podium. I'd like now for you to stare without blinking for 5 seconds at those objects. Okay. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do, same thing. 5 seconds, staring without blinking. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and look at their eyes. Either in front or back. Okay, no talking, no talking. You see what's happening? You see what's happening?
Say start and stop.
Okay, no talking. Start. Okay. Was it the same experience? Was it a little unnerving? Okay, so what that is an awareness of the intersubjective space that exists between people, between each other, in face-to-face. It doesn't have to be face-to-face, even in the presence of another. So, the presence of another is not simply another object. Now, the unnerving experience of this 5 seconds staring into another person's eyes, we manage this unnerving. We manage our social engagements through what I call eye grammar and body dance. These are strategies that we've learned unconsciously, nobody's pointed this out, about how we interact with people. We don't stare at them. We don't get too close. We engage in a kind of dance. It's a dance of engagement that also distances us and protects us. And this is the mundane world that allows us to manage interacting with other people without flipping out. And one of the biggest sources of social fear is public speaking. And I say that, now I'm getting afraid. But the reason is because all these eyes are looking at you. So I hope I've convinced you about this intersubjective space, that we're not just isolated atoms, and in this intersubjective space, there is an ethical beholding, a sense of the presence of another person that is not an object. So I've talked about life, I've talked about birth. This also applies in the context of death. So, mundane death. We render death mundane. Remember I talked about with the preaching, we render death mundane. The trick time plays is to lull us into the belief that everything lasts forever. And although nothing does, we continue to live inside that dream. And that dream is the mundane everydayness of life that we motor through. And we need this dream. We need to live in this dream in order to function in everyday life. This is in contrast to sacred death. Where death alerts us to the sacred mystery of being alive, of astonishment, reverence, fear, and humility, of finding ourselves alive in the unfathomable mystery, and the unfathomable mystery of our ending. What the hell awaits us? And the utter incomprehensibility and the finality and shock of death that ruptures this everyday dream. So I want to read you a quote from Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which I think really captures this distinction. Ivan saw that he was dying, and he was in continual despair. In the depths of his heart, he knew he was dying, but not only was he not accustomed to the thought, he simply could not grasp it. Cassius is a man. All men are mortal, therefore Cassius is mortal. Had certainly applied to Cassius, but certainly not applied to himself. That Cassius, man in the abstract, was mortal was perfectly correct, but he was not Cassius, not an abstract man, but a creature quite separate from all others. He had been little Vanya with Mama and Papa, with toys, with all the joys, griefs, and delights of childhood, boyhood, and youth. Had Cassius kissed his mother's hand? Rioted like that at school when the pastry was bad? Had Cassius been in love like that? Cassius really was mortal, and it was right for him to die. But for me, little Vanya, with all my thoughts and emotions, it's altogether a different matter. It cannot be that I ought to die. That would be too terrible. So this is the contrast between our everydayness, mundane death. Yeah, of course, we all die. What's the problem? And oh my God, I'm going to die. Oh my God, I keep. Okay, so I've talked about mundane and sacred death, and I now want to talk about ethical beholding in death. Death is a sacred experience. This picture really does it to me. We don't dispose of others like an object. We saw that in our interaction demonstration, right? Funerals mark our sacred ethical beholding one to another. Sorry, went too fast, but I want to now, what I've talked about up until now is face-to-face or one-on-one presence of another. And I want to contrast that now with moral abstractions and moral universals. And I want to draw a parallel of this to the blue jay experience. The blue jay experience of naked experience, and the word blue jay now is an abstract meaning that is applied to that creature that renders it mundane. And the same thing is happening when we talk about moral abstractions and moral principles. When we start talking about here's how we should behave, as opposed to being with somebody. Okay. So ethical beholding is the basis for moral principles and ethical codes. But moral principles and ethical codes are abstractions that regulate communal engagements and guide individual conduct. These are guidelines, signposts, abstractions. And there's a particular kind of abstraction, moral universals, which are moral abstractions, but they're presumed to apply to everyone. Thou shalt not, right? This is a moral universal. It's an abstraction. It's also a universal. I've been talking about mostly positive things, but more than moral beholdenness beats in the human heart. And evil is something that is part of our humanity. And the belief in the supernatural as a source of evil is not necessary. Humans are quite capable of every wickedness. This is Joseph Conrad. If you haven't read his Heart of Darkness or any of his other works, I urge you to do that because he knows the heart of darkness. So moral abstractions and moral universals can provide guidance for the good, but they can also be avenues for evil. And here's a quote by somebody who is in the belly of the beast of evil, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that he is doing good, or that it is a well-considered act in conformity with natural law. Think about the Holocaust. This was the purification of the human race. What greater moral good could there be? Moral abstractions objectify others as an object, and this enables wickedness. So, this is leading me into moral universals are not universal. We presume moral universals are not universal. They're abstractions that arise in a particular social, cultural, and historical context. Example, thou shalt not, right? Moral universal for those who are in the Judaic-Christian tradition, who believe that there is a divine, present God who issues their moral directives through a divine text. For those who don't share this is not something that applies to them. And so the universal is universal for them, but it isn't universal for everyone. Cons, one should always respect the humanity in others, and one should only act in accordance with the rules that could hold for everyone. Cited this before, right? This is the product of Enlightenment reasoning. It does not apply for most of humanity, which has lived in hierarchical cultures where there were different rules for different people. And this principle would absolutely not hold. And religion, which is the site of moral universals, right, offers a comfortable certainty about the miracle of our birth, the mystery of our death, and the existence of moral universals. We can relax because there is certainty. And they're all shouting different universals with malice toward others, highlighting our existential plight. There are no moral universals, but there's a frightful need to have them. So this leads us to the issue of moral relativism in the ethical society. If there are no moral universals, then anything goes. It's random, your choice is arbitrary. How do you pick one from another? So those of us, speak for myself in the ethical society, when I tell people that I'm either from the ethical society or that I don't believe in God, the immediate reaction of some people is shock. Because how can you live a moral life without some kind of moral universal? Everything's relative for you. And I've seen a poll, this was some time ago, where they asked people, how would you feel about one of your children marrying somebody of a different religion, somebody with a criminal history, or somebody who doesn't believe in God? Guess who ended up at the lowest? Because if you don't believe in God, you have no morals. So, accompanying the belief that there are no moral universals, which I'm certain, is the spectra of moral relativism. Anything goes. Are we lost? Are we bereft? Lacking universals, absolutes, does not imply that anything goes. These are a false dichotomy. And it's a common dichotomy. If you do not have a universal, then everything's arbitrary. Just take your pick, anything goes. Not true. Because things matter, actions matter, have significance, meaning, and consequences within a historical, cultural, and personal context. And with regard to the ethical society and our core values, which we state every Sunday, if you look at them, there are 8 that begin with I. Think about thou shalt not versus I am. Free to question, to learn, to accept responsibility. Very different, right? And the 2 others say every person is important and unique. These ethical society humanist values are the quintessential expression of Enlightenment liberal democracy in the West. This is who we are. And we are the beneficiaries of a long history of struggle, strife, sacrifice, and loss that has bequeathed these moral values to us. And they are fragile, contingent, and precious, which is precisely why we need to assert